Good evening.
Hello. Good evening.
My name is Dan Chartrand. I'm the owner and founder of Water Street Bookstore. And the mission of Water Street Bookstore is to build community around the written word, and we're right on mission tonight. Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate your coming out tonight to talk about your new book, The Hardworking Woman's Guide to Money. It's by our guest author tonight, Kathleen Thomas, also known to some as KT. It's so great to have you here. I'm just going to read a quick bio, and then I'm going to ask you to join me in welcoming Kathleen. Kathleen Thomas is a certified financial planner who often goes by KT, has worked in the financial services industry for over 2 decades. She's the founder of New Day Solutions, an independent registered advisor firm. And, so many of our customers are hardworking women who choose to patronize Main Street businesses. Over half of our customers, I would say. So it is such a pleasure to have you here tonight to talk about this very important subject, which is of great interest to our patrons. So thank you,
Great.
Kathleen, and please join me in welcoming.
Hello, and thank you all for coming. People ask me why this book. I've been giving financial advice for a long time, and one of the things I know that many people feel is that there's just no good place to get information without trying to figure out what people's agenda is, or if it's a company that sells you a product, are they really giving you the great advice, or are they just trying to tell you what they want to tell you to buy your product, or how do I tell my kids what to do with their money when sometimes I'm not even sure what it is I'm supposed to be doing with my money. So the goal of this book was to really write a book for the consumer, people that I might never meet, and talk to them about things I think people want to know in a way. People said to me, what's the spirit of the book? And I said, imagine you're sitting on the couch with your best friend who happens to know everything about you and everything about money. And we're just having a conversation about what you could do, things you could think about. And so that was the spirit I tried to reach in writing this book. The other thing was, many of my male clients said, well, why'd you decide to write a book for women? And I'm like, well, hello, I'm a woman. But beyond that, women have definite financial challenges beyond men, including time out of the workforce and pay inequity, and how they're going to manage those things and then add additional life expectancy. We actually have to spend a little bit more time and be a little bit more purposeful because we don't have as much room for error. So, I thought the best relationships in my life are all of my girlfriends, and some of them have managed to come here tonight and support me, for which I am incredibly grateful. And I actually dedicated the book to my sisters and my sisters of choice, those people that we each support each other. This idea that together we're all bigger than we are if we're individual. Now, I didn't really see the Me Too movement or the women's pay equity movement gaining steam when I started writing this book 3 years ago, but it's somehow like you wake up and you're on second base. So I wake up and suddenly everybody's talking about the things that I was writing this book about. And so in the money business, we always say timing is everything, so I guess it really is everything. And but I thought about this book for young women coming of age mostly because it's about establishing what your guiding principles are going to be, like how you're going to decide, make your decisions. What happens is decisions come at you kind of quick in life where they go, oh, you're going to buy this car, or you're going to pay for it, or you're going to finance it. Are you going to do 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Are you going to lease it? Do you need a new car this year? Should you wait? Should you trade your car in? Should you try to sell it on Craigslist? Should you give it to a relative? Should you give it to a charity? And you're trying to make all these decisions on like a Saturday at the car dealership while the dealer's going sign, sign, sign. And so what I really try to do is say, decide in advance, not at the car dealership, although the car dealership is really kind of a dangerous place, but decide in advance what you're for. And then it's easy to decide what doesn't fit. So like as an example, I say to people, when they talk about leasing or buying as an example, I say, are you the kind of person that keeps a car for 3 years or 4 years or 10 years? And they go, I've had this car for 12 years. I'm like, well, then you buy the next car. because you're actually not the kind of person that needs a new car every 3 or 4 years. Are you the kind of person who drives a lot of miles or not a lot of miles? Oh, I only drive maybe 10,000 miles a year. Well, then maybe you could lease, because you're really not ever going to gain any equity in that car. But just so that you start to learn a little bit about not them, but you. And be able to say, this is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. So for me, everybody has their own personal slants about things, like lending money to their children, or paying for college or not paying for college, or carrying credit card debt or not carrying credit card debt, or paying down your mortgage early or not. Everyone has different reasons for why they do what they do, but a lot of times they have no reason at all except that this decision came along and they made one and they moved on and they really never looked back. So financial decisions in a life are like interest that compounds. They stack up, meaning we make one good decision and that's a good thing and it moves us in the right path. Then we make another decision, maybe not as good, and it moves us away from the path. Maybe not really over to the bad side, but a little bit away from where we want to be. And then every decision that we make that isn't in alignment with what we really want moves us further away from what we really want. Except everything that you see on TV and radio and YouTube and Facebook and blah, 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 all of that is stuff that takes you off your path. It basically says, how about this new handbag? How about that trip? How about, and you need to decide, I can afford that and I want to do that. I can still have what I want and do that. Or I really can't. Maybe this year's a staycation year. And so that you start to figure out what really matters. So when you're young, especially like I think about young women just getting out of, just either getting into college or out of college, that they've maybe never shared their finances with anybody. They've never owned a home. They hopefully haven't bounced any checks, but you never know. That could be, I talk about that in the book, how easy it is to make mistakes when you're young, except the mistakes are usually smaller and you can fix them easier. But if you get used to making mistakes, they get bigger as you go. So, a bigger mistake later on might be buying more house than you can really afford, because you actually never thought about how much of a mortgage payment you could afford before you saw the realtor, who, by the way, always believes that you could afford a much bigger house. And they believe that because they get paid when you are happy enough to buy something that you just love. And so it's not that they're trying to sell you something that you can't pay for. It's that they're trying to sell you something that you love, and they know that you will love those granite countertops. And you'll love those hardwood floors, and you'll love all these things that maybe is, $50,000 or $100,000 more than you wanted to spend, but it's really only a couple of $100 a month, and you could probably pull it off. And then once you love something like that, it's kind of hard to love the thing that you actually can afford. So in the book, I talk a little bit about figuring that out before you do that, so that, you don't, I actually will say to the realtor, this is my price. Poor Lauren Stone, I love her, but she's over in Hampton. And I said, this is where I am, and I'll look at anything below that number. And so she starts, brings me listings of things over that number, and I said, I know we talked about this, but I'm actually not going to look at that right now. If after, a month of looking around, there's nothing in this price, then we'll look up. Now, I am the financial discipline girl. I do this all day, every day. But what I'll say to you is just knowing what your number is empowers you to then go stay within that number. You might pay more, because you might have been able to afford more, you just maybe didn't want to pay more. But you don't do it by accident. You do it because you actually explored what you could buy in what you thought you could afford and couldn't find what you really wanted. And then that's true for all things financial. It's about just taking a little bit of time to learn a little bit. I talk a little bit about this in the book. All the ways that you can pay more for everyday life. And it's not always the big things that you choose. It's like all the little things. Like I always think about, so like my daughter Jackie's got, Zulu and Netflix and whatever. She cut the cable cord a long time ago because she's 31 and there's no way she's going to pay some big cable bill. She thinks the rest of us are insane, but I bet if I took a survey of people here over 45, most of them are still paying for the cable bill. Because changing is something that we don't do that easy. We sort of just keep going along, and we keep renewing, saying maybe someday we'll look at that, but we really don't, because it's convenient and it's easy and it's already in place. And so what I try to talk about is the idea that your money is really important. And, you know, why the hardworking woman? Because I actually never met a woman with a lot of extra time. Every woman I know has got like a job and has got like another job with, you know, kids or parents or sick relatives or neighbors or school committee or a million things. They have a million things. Women don't just work and then go home. Women work and then they work and then they work and they work and they do these other things that are meaningful to them, and they're very busy. And what happens is a hardworking woman has to actually slow down enough to work a little for themselves. And I know that's really hard because I'm one of those women and it's hard. So I wrote this book for all these women, women who do not have like enough time to study everything but need to come up with like a framework. And in the book I call it the guideposts. It's basically deciding like what the range will be, like what's an okay number. How do you, if you're married or you're contemplating getting married, how do you decide you're going to share money? Do you share credit? I usually recommend that people have a little of their own money, even if they merge all their money, but that they have some money everybody should have some money that is their own money. And the reason why I say that is because it makes a relationship lopsided when one person has all the control. And, you know, besides cheating on your spouse, you know, money is the thing that ends the marriage. And a lot of times it's because one person is really in charge and the other person is not in charge at all and resents it. So that everybody keeps like a little bit of their own wealth. And I always recommend that you don't merge your credit unless it's something like you're buying a house together. But it's like credit cards. I talk a little bit about my great first husband in the book. I've had a lot of opportunities to learn these things, and some of them kind of, you know, your own learnings can be kind of expensive, but that's okay. And I've used it all here, so it's worked out great. But, you know, meeting somebody, starting a relationship with somebody that maybe doesn't have good credit and you have good credit. And so a very common theme is you think you're going to help them get their credit score up by sharing your good credit with them, and then that'll help rebuild them. And very altruistic. What I'll say to you is sometimes there's a reason why people don't have good credit, and it's because they actually don't value taking care of their credit. And it might be better off to put $500 in a savings account and let them get a secured credit card through the bank and have them just, you know, continue to use it and keep your name off it. That you want to keep your credit as clean as possible because it affects the cost of everything that you do over your lifetime. Your insurance company will charge you more for your car insurance if your credit score is low. Now, what one has to do to the other, I don't know. Some actuary somewhere decided that people with lower credit could pay more. And you know what? People with lower credit do pay more, and they pay more all the time. 10, 15% more every single year for car insurance than people with a 725 credit score or better. And so that's just a little bit more money that they steal from you, literally, because you just don't know. So there's a lot of tools and information out there. My book is just one of what I think about is many tools, but it provides like a framework that just says, these are the things you should be looking for. It's broken down into two places. I tell some stories to try to help drive home some points. And then I also have what's called the quick tip guide, which is within each chapters of the book. And in the quick tips are like, it's like the down and dirty thing you need to know about buying a car. What do you need to know about your bank? You know, what do you need to know about your mortgage company? So it's like easy. I have, what should I do about this? I get this one thing that just says, this is what you need to know. But in the book, there are these tenets that help you, that are meant to help you think it through. And so I would like to share one story if you guys have a few minutes, because I think this is, you know, I share a lot of stories in the book, but what I'll say to you is that the overwhelming thing that has happened in my life is I've learned one thing. Sometimes life comes at you hard and fast. And suddenly everything you thought was really important is no longer important. You know, a friend of mine says, you know, something major changed in his health, and then all of a sudden everything else just faded away. And so nobody ever knows what's going to happen in their life. You know, you have the plan. I don't know, some people have like the 5-year plan, or they know where they think they're going and how it's going to happen, but life sometimes can change, and your ability to get over it is part of it, and figuring out what parts you can work on is really important. So I talk about embracing change, and I tell this story in the book, and so many of you know, because it talks about it on the back of the book, that I have a long love of things hard and complicated and sweaty. So I do long distance triathlon, and I've done a bunch of marathons, and the more complicated it is, the more I like to try to figure it out. Sort of like I have like a curious mind, and I want to know how these things all come together, and sometimes they don't all come together, but you know, I do try. And so I'm going to read this part. So sometimes life comes at you fast and unexpectedly. In the summer of 2008, my business was growing quickly, and I was in the best shape of my life at 45 years old. I felt almost invincible as I began the Timberman Triathlon, a 70.3 Ironman race. I remember coming out of the swimming portion of the race feeling a little dizzy. I had injured an artery in my neck during the swim, but I didn't know that. So I took off my wetsuit and hopped on my bike and started some righteous hill climbing. It was up at Guilford Mountain. Very fun. My heart rate climbed with the hills when 15 miles into the 56-mile ride, I felt the worst ever wave of pain hit my head. I thought I had a migraine or a heat stroke. Yes, I would have run through a heat stroke back then. I ran with a stress fracture for a year. My bike wobbled a little, but I straightened it and I kept riding. I am stubborn and goal-oriented. I'm a stubborn and goal-oriented woman, and quitting is not in my DNA. I passed up water stops to pick off some racers and completed the 56 miles. After a goo, which is race food, and three Advil, I changed shoes and started the 13.1 mile run. By then, the temperature was soaring. About 3 miles in, I considered quitting. Then I looked around with my still fuzzy vision and thought, suck it up, KT, everybody looks terrible. So I just kept running until my body finally realized that I was out of my mind, and I collapsed. For the next 3 days, I lay in the cardiac intensive care unit of a small local hospital in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, projectile vomiting and passing out over and over again. Doctors thought I'd had a heart attack. Twice more while in the ICU, I suffered that almost unbearable wave of pain through my head. Only then did a night nurse figure it out, that I may have had something neurological happen. She referred me to a neurologist who gave me a different diagnosis. So some 13 miles into the biking portion of the triathlon, when I felt that first wave, I suffered a stroke. In the hospital, I suffered 2 more. After hearing the news, I laid in the hospital bed and knew things would need to change, and change fast. I go on to talk about what happened and what the recovery was like. But what I'll say to you is the most important part of this was, as I laid there, what I realized was that people would be sad, but they'd move on. But I wouldn't if I didn't take care of myself. I was always that woman that always took care of everyone else. And it didn't even occur to me, even when something was wrong with me, and it's screaming at me that I should stop, because I'm just not built that way. I'm built go, go, go. And so what I learned was it's okay to stop. My favorite saying to my triathlon buddies is live to run another day, or live to bike another day, or whatever, however it goes. I throw it out there all the time because I made some significant changes right away in my business what I talk later about in the book, and I won't bore you with it, but I manage people's money for a living. I ran a pretty big size practice for an individual practitioner. And so when I had a stroke, I was self-employed, and going back to work was something you had to do right away, because it wasn't like there was somebody going to sit in my task and just take it over for me. And then 3 weeks later, Lehman Brothers had their stroke, and the financial system collapsed. So I was going to occupational therapy, speech, and physical therapy 3 days a week for 3 hours, sleeping 15 hours a day, and working 25 hours a week, talking to clients on the phone because I could still talk, and just trying to stay alive. But I got right on to the solution. First, because I had no choice, and I had to get on to the solution. But secondly, because everybody has certain gifts, and that's one of my gifts, is that I get over it quicker than other people do. And I figure out what I can do, and then I just try to move on. So for my clients, the world was coming to an end, and there was nothing I could do about what was happening in the market except, manage their exposure to it and talk to them a lot and tell them what I thought about things, and tried to just keep them safe as I could and get through it. But the other thing I did is I looked at everything else we could do. Because even when you feel really powerless, there is something else you can do. It might not be the thing you actually want to do, but it might be the thing you could do. So at the same time that the financial crisis happened and investments fell, many of my clients, like many people here, lost their jobs. And so I took advantage of the fact that people that made lower income, and I said, let's take advantage of lower income and convert some of the IRA to Roth IRAs for free, because they were suddenly in a no tax bracket. And then interest rates fell to the ground. So every single client got refinanced, because if they had a mortgage, we were going to pay less. And so we worked on that. Now, what I really like to work on is stocks and bonds when they're growing. I love that. Portfolio allocation and what are we doing with this? And I love that. But the reality is, all I was doing there was trying to not lose money for people, right? Just hanging on, trying to get through it, because you can't control those things. But I found those couple of things that my clients and I could control, and we worked on those things. And so that's a big part of financial control, is sometimes knowing when you're not in control and then figuring out what you could work on, because at least you could do that, and then doing that instead of being, paralyzed by the fact that you can't do the thing you want to do, whatever that thing is. So you do the other things that move you forward anyway. And so I hope you enjoy my book. I poured my soul into it. And I saw Jackie sneak in, so I want to introduce you to my editor-in-chief, darling daughter, Jackie Fitzgerald. Raise your hand. So when I say that woman thing, I am a complete believer that together we can do more. Thanks so much for coming tonight. And I will answer any questions that anybody has.
Including portfolio.
Portfolio allocation, stocks, bonds, mutual funds.
No net. Ready?
Perfect. No net. I'm good. Throw it out there. No, it's not 2008. How about I answer that first?
Can you talk about the issue of having taken time off and what that does to you from paid taxed salary work or hourly work, and what that does to you financially, and if you have any ideas that we should be advocating for in our legislative work or in the way we're paid or benefits, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I do. I think, first of all, that I think that people underestimate the value of benefits that they get through their employer, and the void that creates when they're not collecting that kind of income. And so one of the things that I find really difficult right now is, for a long time, I would say to people, you have to make sure that you hold on to your employer benefits, or you can COBRA when you leave, and that'll cover you for 18 months, and then ultimately you can hope to find a job by then and get new insurance. Then Obamacare came along, which actually created a long-term plan for people that never went back to, quote, the job, who could access health insurance in the health insurance marketplace. And then, now the next president's come along and said, hey, listen, we're not going to fund this. And all of a sudden, this safety net that people thought they had, it was actually better when they didn't think they had one. Because when they didn't think they had one, they didn't try to make those choices. But when they thought they had a safety net, they started making those moves. And now all of a sudden, they're like, well, we're not going to fund the safety net. All of a sudden, people really have to, I don't want to say get over it, but really, it seems that this administration is unwilling to fund that. And so healthcare for people out of work is going to continue to be and grow, I think, in terms of cost in the state of New Hampshire. And I don't think there's a lot around that there seems to be a lot of willingness on the part of legislators to supplement and change. And I think that's difficult because today we know, healthcare is 17% of GDP. Like, we spend more on healthcare than any other country in the world, period. And consumers spend a lot out of pocket. And that doesn't seem like it's actually going to get better. I mean, it is much better for people that are Medicare eligible, so over 65. They can actually look at all of those plans, if you could stand it, because there are millions of them, and find the one that actually is the best fit for them and change every year without concern about losing their coverage. But unless you're 65, that doesn't apply. And I think it's really difficult and expensive to do that. And I see people paying, husband and wife paying $1,800 a month for health care because they're not working for an employer with an employer-sponsored plan. That's a mortgage. It's a ridiculous amount. And so I think that's tough. I think that family medical leave is, we used to have a lifestyle in America where the spouse could stay home and take care of the kids, and the other one could go to work and everybody could still afford it. And in America, that's actually not really affordable anymore. You really have to decide how much less you'll have in order to do that. And I have lots of people who've figured it out, but they live on a lot less. They decide that they don't need, they have an old car and they have a less old car. Most Americans have a car loan and maybe another car loan, or a car just paid off and a car loan. They have one mortgage that they've been paying on forever that they never think about changing houses. Now we know Americans changing houses about every 8 or 10 years now, which is really expensive. And so part of it is if you want to be, like, I've been self-employed the entire ride. So I've been self-employed since 1993. And over the years, things have changed a lot, back and forth, and the rules do change. And what you have to have is enough cushion to be able to respond to it, because unfortunately, we're subject to the waves of the voting masses. They're going one way, and then 4 years later they're going the next way, and it's hard. So any plan that you come up with has to have a big safety net to allow for the fact that things are definitely going to change. Yes?
Just a note of agreement in one of the points that you made about a couple each having a certain amount of money that is their own and used in the way the couple individually would like to spend it. We're about to celebrate our 50th reunion of or
Congratulations.
marriage.
Anniversary.
And sometimes I brag about our marriage by saying we've never had a financial argument, and the reason is we each have our own bank account and we each have a certain amount of money. We collaborate, we make choices together and so on, but that has, I think, helped with the fact that we haven't really had tension over that.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to ask you is that we have a daughter who's just past the age of 40, recently divorced, And I'm interested, we're going to buy your book, by the way.
Thank you.
And primarily because we want to be able to help our daughter through this very difficult time,
Right.
where she wasn't responsible for a lot of the decisions that you address in your book. And I just wonder, what advice might you give in order to achieve the balance of not taking over or even presume
Right.
to take over what happens now that one of your children may be on their own, particularly a woman. But what advice might you give to achieve that balance of being there for them but not taking over?
You know, it's funny because I, have been in this situation, and I have I've had lots of friends where they're, you love your kids and you want to help them, but you can't fix it for them because part of what they need to do is be empowered to fix it for themselves. So what I would say is, first, the idea that she could come to you if she wanted to for information and advice, but that she didn't, what she really needed to do was get the tools so that she could do it. I think it's really hard, especially after you've had like a big setback, because, pride is a funny thing. And so, just what I would say to her is the first thing she needs to do is just sort of like, figure out where the bodies are buried, what's left, where am I starting from? And then there are lots of great resources available. Like I have like a podcast that's free. There are a lot of good financial podcasts out there today that are free for people that, and I always find that the 40-somethings, especially if you're driving, podcasting's like the radio now. And except you can listen to only the channel you want. And so there's a lot of free information out there today for her, where maybe 10 years ago there really wasn't a lot. But the idea is this is her opportunity to rebuild it the way she wants it, and then to figure out where she's going from here. But some important things, especially in the recently separated or divorced, is to actually get a copy of your free credit report and see what it looks like. And I talked about how to do that in the book, so that's actually, make sure that any accounts that you had that were both your names are on it have been closed, and so that there's no more opportunity for any of that going forward. And then, really, it'll be establishing your own safety net. So it doesn't have to be sexy. It just has to be available. I mean, I think sometimes people say, well, I don't want to leave any money in the bank because they're not paying me any interest. And I'm like, I am very sorry. You actually don't understand the point. The point is that if you need it, it's there. And especially if you're by yourself, you need a bigger safety net than somebody who, two people living together, both working, they have each other as a safety net. Somebody living by themselves, especially if she has children, it's like she needs a bigger safety net for herself because there isn't somebody else there. The other thing is she has to learn how to make decisions for one. And I talk about this a little bit in the book. It's like, I sort of say, financial decision for one, please. That people that are married, how easy it is to almost pick up a conversation that you had 5 years ago about something and then make a decision about it. We forget that when people are by themselves, they don't have that easy sounding board. So that person that they can just say, geez, this is what I was thinking about, and sound it off somebody that they know isn't trying to steer them wrong or drive a decision, but just hears them. And so what I would encourage her is to find that person. It doesn't have to be you. It could be a mentor. It could be somebody that she works with. It could be a financial professional. It could be it could be a really good friend. Somebody that just hears them and doesn't have a stake in the game, is invested with what decision they make, but could just hear them. Because most of the time what I find about women, especially women that are newly by themselves, is they kind of just want to be heard. They don't want to be told. They want to be heard. And they want to be able to get to their own decision. I mean, every once in a while somebody says, can't you just tell me what to do and I'll just go do it? And I'll be like, okay. But mostly what they want to do is they want to be heard, and they want to feel like they were part of the decision. And so if you want to empower a woman, you let her tell you what she's thinking about.
Thank you.
instead of what you think she should be thinking about.
Yeah, a lot of those decisions have to happen very quickly too. That's
That's right.
one of the issues.
That's right.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes.
I'm very excited to read your book, so I'm glad
Thank
that
you.
Melanie invited me tonight. I'm wondering, and maybe your book answers this, but I feel like as I'm getting older and have kids, and there's new financial decisions that keep coming up. And so
Yes.
do you have any advice of where to go to find those answers? You mentioned earlier, like, you think, should I go to a financial advisor? Should I go? And you wonder, like,
Yeah.
the trust value. And
That's
as
right.
I'm trying to, so, I mean, maybe your book addresses
I could talk to you a
this.
little bit about that, sure. So one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of making picking the right resources at the right time. Like, what do you need at different times in your life? So if you're just starting working and, you've got really small income, you could probably do your own taxes. If you're just starting saving and you've got your first job, you could just pick that one fund that represents the year you think you might retire and put all your money in it and not think about it for a while. But when you get closer, so you get like within 10 years of retirement, suddenly you've accumulated some real money. And then how it gets managed starts to matter more because your time frame's not as long, and mistakes are hard to outlive if you think you're going to be spending it in a few years. So all of a sudden, it's like when you bring a financial professional, or if you bring a financial professional on board, some people love it. They read mutual fund magazines, they read Money Magazine, Kiplinger's, they like to do the research, they read the reports, they like to follow stocks. God bless those people. There are those people in the world, but most of us are not those people. We might be interested, we might even be casually interested, but we're not really interested. Not enough that we're going to do it with any kind of a discipline and follow through. So if you have some assets that need direction and you're not that person, it's a complicated world. Investing is not simple. So, what you want to think about is you're either that person and you're going to spend the time and do the work, or you're not that person and you're going to look to find somebody who will do the work. Now, I work as a registered investment advisor, and the reason why I do that is because I don't have an affiliation with a broker dealer or a mutual fund company where I get paid to push their products. But there are a lot of those kind of people out there in the industry that actually do good work. But if somebody works for an insurance company, somebody works for a mutual fund company, somebody tells you that they're a registered representative, when they say they're a registered representative, what they're saying is they represent the firm to you. Now, what they might feel is that they represent you to the firm and the firm to you. And they do. They're like a conduit. But they actually get paid to represent the firm. And it's important to know that because you want to be able to put your financial decisions through that filter. It doesn't make what they say to you wrong. It doesn't even make what they say to you bad advice. But it means that you have to ask the question, how are you compensated? How do you decide it? If something seems too good to be true, like the guaranteed income annuity rider. Anybody that's ever bought one, they know what this is. The rest of you just don't do that. Really expensive ways with which to try to protect your money while you grow it, while the people that are benefiting the most from that is the companies that are placing them. They're very, very expensive products and people buy them all the time because what they hear is it'll grow every year, it'll never go down, and will guarantee to pay you 7% income for the rest of your life. Now, that's not actually how it really works, and frankly, you should know that most people can take 7% off their investment account for the rest of their lives and not run out of money anyway, except if you pay 3% to grow it, it kind of gets in the way of it ever being worth enough that 7% will be good. But what you hear is, you can take 7% for the rest of your life based on the value, blah, blah, blah. It never goes down, it only goes up. And you go, great, where do I sign? So when it sounds like the free lunch, and that little sound in the back of your head says, it seems like awful, this is so perfect, why doesn't everybody do it? Then you go, whoa, wait a minute, I know what that means. That means that it's probably not true. Or at least I don't understand all the parts of it. And so I talk a lot in the book about being a good consumer. So if you interview a financial professional, you want to ask them. First of all, there's this little thing called broker check, which you can just Google and look up. You want to make sure nobody's suing them. I think that would be good. Maybe no fraud, jail, whatever. It all pops up there and it says, does my person have in good standing? I think that's like the first thing. Second thing is, how do they work? How are they paid? And if a financial advisor waffles at all explaining to you how they're paid, then you don't hire them. Because if they can't communicate how they're paid, you'll never understand how they're paid. So a financial professional can get paid a number of different ways. And I'm not going to stand here and say this one is bad or this one is good. But what I'll say to you is we moved our firm to get to a place where it was clients pay us fees. It's very straightforward. This is what you pay. This is how you pay. You don't pay these things. But what I'll say to you is that if they can't explain it to you within 3 minutes, then it's probably complicated. And if it's complicated, that would be one of the first things that would be like a red flag to me. Why should this be so complicated? So make sure there are no criminals. Make sure you understand how they are paid and that they can tell you that. You want to ask them, things like their philosophy for how they would manage your money. How often can you expect to see them or hear from them? How many other clients do they take care of? And for God's sake, how do they take care of all these many clients? So there are a lot of firms where you have a bunch of advisors working in a firm, and they can take care of a lot of clients together. But if you have like an advisor in a little office by themselves, they probably can't take care of as many clients. It doesn't mean they don't provide great service. It means they can't do it for 300 families, and you want to ask them. And so I would start with that. And part of it also is, if you know people who work with this advisor, or if the advisor is willing to provide referrals. And so what I'll say to you is that referrals are kind of like a slippery thing, where the advisor's only going to give you their best clients that say they'll talk to you, and then those advisors always say, geez, amazing, because of course, would I ask a client that wouldn't give me a good referral to talk to somebody? You wouldn't. But at the same time, if you don't ask, they may have no clients and you didn't even talk to anybody, right? There's nothing to lose here but, a little bit of pride. I would ask. I would ask their background. I would talk to them about their philosophy. And then I would make sure that you're the kind of client, meaning you do the kind of work size and what you need that they do, right? So if you're, if you're a self-employed person, as an example, like I've been running my own business a long time, I know a lot about being self-employed. But if I were looking to hire somebody, like my accountant's self-employed, so my CPA works with a lot of self-employed people too, and that's why I work with him, because he actually understands what it takes and all the moving parts of a business like mine. And even though I could probably the most qualified person in the room to do my own taxes, I don't, because I actually believe that George knows more about it than I do, because he does it all day, every day, and I do this all day, every day. So I really believe at where I am in my life is that I want to hire the people that know how to do what I need, and then not do those things, and do the things I'm actually good at. So spend my energy on the things that I think matter to me, my family, and my clients, and not the other stuff. And so the right resources, like you need help. You have resources, but you want more of your own time, and you want to make good decisions. And then also make sure that that person's willing to teach you something. If every time you see them, they're talking 10 miles over your head and saying sign here, sign here, sign here, then that's kind of a bad sign too. You want to make sure that you're actually understanding. You don't have to know everything they know about, why you don't buy Tesla or whatever. But you have to know that enough about it to make a decision that you're comfortable with. Otherwise, you won't be comfortable. And that's the number one reason why people leave advisors. It's not because advisors don't provide performance, but Sorelli just came out with this great study. It's because actually people don't understand how advisors are compensated. And the second is that they think their advisors don't communicate well. Imagine that. So I would say I'd look for those things.